Erik, Taiwan, you made a prediction last year.
Look, Xi has been making very uneconomic decisions that would indicate they're going to do something. They're preparing for something in Taiwan. One, for example, their big banks with their huge fleet of aircraft that they own for commercial aircraft. They're selling it all. They're really making themselves sanction proof. They're accumulating like a year and a half worth of wheat, massive amounts of hydrocarbons they're bringing in. I mean, and he even says to his speeches to the standing committee, prepare for great conflict.
Erik Prince, welcome to Off Limits. I named the podcast Off Limits because I guess apparently the things we talk about are off limits.
So I just started a podcast and it's actually called Off Leash.
Is that true?
Yeah.
There we go.
So we're off.
Well, Erik and I met we were in Vegas, and I was forced into an early morning CrossFit class, and I saw a barrel-chested blonde man who was probably around my age, and it was bothering me because you were wall balling. You were throwing this 20-pound ball so much farther than me, and in what seemed like some ease. You had kind of a relaxed look on your face, and I was doing everything to survive. So, and then I found out it was you. It was confirmed, and you were very nice. You kind of came up, and then we had breakfast. You had a cappuccino, like the Navy SEAL you are, because you ate too much the night before.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. But I thought your perspective was fantastic. I had dinner with 3 people that work with you, not for you, and that's important to mention because they weren't being kiss asses. And one of your colleagues said you're the most misunderstood man in America, which I think is which I would agree with because I was very impressed with your command of history and also your ambitions. So I want to get into that. I want to get into the military-industrial complex. These are the things I want to talk to a guy like you. Because my perspective on you was what I got from the media, and you seemed to me like a shadowy warlord. Just this tough dude who was a Navy SEAL, came from a wealthy family, but made his own fortune. And there's a little thing like that with guys like that. We're like, oh, geez, me and my friends who had read a book about you was like, I don't know, that guy's a high performer. So there it is.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I would disagree.
You would. Yeah. All you guys are that way though. This is my impression of every Navy SEAL, every Special Forces guy. Every one of you guys goes, I don't belong here. I mean, I'm just the water boy. What, me? Everybody else is, there's that culture.
Hey, look, when I finally made it to a SEAL team, there was 3 pictures hanging outside the locker room every day, and those guys were like gods to me. It was Mike Thornton, Tom Norris, and Bob Carey, right? 3 SEALs that had received the Medal of Honor for Vietnam, mm-hmm. And so yeah, walking in as a very junior guy. I remember when I first checked in because I was an officer. You show up as an ensign, you know nothing, and this senior chief comes out and he goes, "Ensign Prince, leader of men, arriving." Because he squeezes the microphone for the 1MC, which is like this announcement bullhorn that goes across the entire command. Mm. And he announced that I was arriving like the commander of the ship was arriving. Because if captain of a ship arrives,
right,
they'll say, "Ding, ding, ding, ding. USS America arriving." In this case, he said, "Ensign Prince, leader of men, arriving." So everybody comes out of the woodwork,
right,
to give you shit. And it's a great...
Oh, because you were an officer.
Exactly.
Oh,
and,
boy.
The FNG, the fucking new guy.
The fucking new guy.
Yep.
And
so it's a great exercise in humility, and it's always important to remember that's where you started, and that's probably where you still belong. Yeah.
I think it's a great... I agree with you. I think that's part of the sort of the thing about doing something hard as a group, And one of the things I love about, I have very little experience with the military, but I did a USO tour, and I came out of it. And my dad was a Marine, and I said, I got to tell you, man, I get the idea of the military and being in a war zone, especially because what happens is it's all about the people next to you. you come last, and there's something very refreshing about that. If you're in a pickup and everybody's got their bags in the pickup, I got a Green Beret there. He's the last bag coming out of that is his bag. He's giving everybody their own bag. It was all those little things that I coming from the self-centered world of Hollywood. I mean, it's quite literally the diametric opposite.
When you do something with your unit, your squad or your platoon or whatever, it is always team gear that gets sorted out first, washed, cleaned, put away, and then your personal gear gets sorted and put away, and then you yourself.
Wow.
So you are the last to shower, the last to take care of any of your own issue first.
Yeah. Which I think is actually one of the prescriptions to happiness. I think that if you put yourself last and spend less time thinking about yourself, the better. I think
there was there was one bit of leadership a senior enlisted guy gave me before I went to Buds. He said, "Remember, it doesn't matter." For the men, it said, "They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care."
Wow.
So it's I think words to live by for any leader.
Yeah. Well, you in a way, you changed the face of, in some ways, military engagement. You could make that argument. I mean, what I mean by that is that hearing about Blackwater and mercenaries, which is how you guys were, it was like basically this is a mercenary group of people, and they're highly trained commandos. And the majority of the mainstream media wasn't your friend, right? Because but it was in a way, and I don't know if I'm right about this, but for the most part, through our modern history, I had not heard of a free enterprise company doing what the U.S. government, what the U.S. military typically does. Am I wrong about that? You did fill a niche.
There's been ebbs and flows of battlefield contractors, supporting U.S. activity all through history. So let me just unpack the mercenary term first. Right?
Yeah.
The Oxford Dictionary definition says it means to fight in the foreign service in a military in a country that is not your own. Okay, so technically, us being contractors for the U.S. government in a declared contingency operation doesn't even meet the definition of mercenary, and particularly it's kind of egregious when disagreeable to call U.S. military veterans that are serving their country again, because they already volunteered to serve the military once, and now they're going back to serve again, calling them mercenaries. People like to use it as a pejorative term. I don't know, but if we were given the chance to put the fires out in a lot of bad situations around the world, call me whatever you want. We would rather be part of the solution and make peace and bring security and stability to millions of people. So whatever. But if you think back to the founding of the country, America was founded by private companies. The Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, Jamestown colonies were actually listed on the London Stock Exchange.
Wow.
Funded by British investors to come and build trade for gold or tobacco or timber or whatever it was they were looking for. And guys like Miles Standish or John Smith were the original private military contractors that were hired by those companies to protect this settlement, this endeavor against animals or Indians or against each other or whatever. And then, across the street from the White House, literally in Washington, D.C., you have Lafayette Park, where there's 4 statues on the corners. Lafayette, Rochambeau, von Steuben, Kosciuszko, 2 Frenchmen, von Steuben, a Prussian, and Kosciuszko, a Pole, all professional military contractors that came and built the Continental Army for pay.
Huh.
So America managed to recognize them right across the street from the White House. So at some point, people didn't think too badly of those evil contractors.
Right. But I heard what I thought was interesting, and when I think about what you built, let's just take Blackwater and let's take its, what it became after that or whatever. You're a guy, you're a good leader, you're a smart guy, you're a military man, and all those things. You did a good job of creating an army, in a sense, with its own air force, with its own intelligence apparatus, with its own special forces units. I mean, and you guys did a lot of work for the U.S. government, right? And probably did it very well. You know, I have a friend who had no skin in the game. He said, those Blackwater guys were very professional. If you look at the vast amount of their work, those guys knew the difference because they were so experienced between who was a civilian and who was not. You know, they weren't making the kind of mistakes that a lot of like young 18, 19-year-old GIs were making. So in a way, he was like, you know, don't believe the hype. My thing with having a private army, if you will, and I know you're gonna take exception to that because I want to hear your rebuttal to this, is I, as a politician or as an American, even just a citizen, would say, hold on, Erik, hold on. I got to put some governors on this. I don't like that you got Cofer Black. I don't like that you got these guys who are very smart, very good at what they did, who used to work for the U.S. government. And now you are kind of getting all this incredible talent, this talent in lethality, in organization, in mobility, and getting the job done. Because what happens if, and people should know, people speak very highly of you. I personally have a very good feeling about you. I mean, you know, people.
So far.
Yeah, so far. But honestly, I know you're a family man. I know people who know you, and I like those people, and the way they speak about you, they're not dummies, and they know character. So my thing is, I may be able to trust Erik Prince and his leadership because he makes everybody swear to the Constitution. He's a patriot. He's probably religious. All those things. Problem is, when you create an apparatus that effective, what happens if somebody, God forbid, knocks you off or you die and somebody takes your place? And now we have somebody who's got nefarious, is only interested in power and could lead a coup and overturn. Is this Hollywood stuff or is this?
I think that's really offensive to think that. So what did Blackwater do? Started as a training facility, because special operations units have been using those kind of places since the 70s, but no one had done it on an industrial scale. Because of my father's success, I got out of the Navy because he'd passed away and my wife had cancer, and I built Blackwater to stay connected to the community. And it was a customer service organization. We did training, and then after 9/11 happened, we did security and logistics and aviation and all the stuff that you need to do to operate for the U.S. government to operate effectively in difficult places. But the core of it, anybody can buy machinery, but it's about the hardware, right? The people that do the job.
Right.
And to say, well, it becomes a private army. I led an organization that was a lot of lions, not lambs.
Right.
And not robots.
Right.
Okay. So these are all people in a society that less than 0.5% serves in the military, volunteered to serve their country, swore to defend the Constitution.
Patriots.
Yeah. And then you just say, well, if I die and somebody else takes over, they're going to become this automaton army of idiots to go do something nefarious.
To go turn the
That's extremely offensive to all these veterans that have already given of themselves an unlimited blank check to the government to say, I'm in to serve the Republic.
The idea would be as if they would go along with that. They're not.
Exactly.
These guys are their own autonomous beings, especially Type A personalities like special operators.
It was, exactly. And so
I didn't think that. I like this rebuttal so far.
They have a very low tolerance for bullshit. So it was the ultimate bunch of volunteers. Unlike the military, which it's called stop loss, where they don't let you out of your service, or they extend your deployment not voluntarily for up to 15 months. We couldn't do that at all. All we could do is hire and fire. And so we had to provide the guys with the best equipment, the best colleagues, the best training, pay them on time. Talk about difficult with a growing business like that. If we were 5 minutes late making payroll on a Friday, by 12:06 that day, the wives were on the phone screaming. Okay.
Yeah.
And
they were private contractors. They were citizens.
Exactly. So, this idea that it becomes a private army set to do whatever, that's just really offensive, and it's inherently inaccurate compared to the kind
which
of
was
people
part of
we
that
employed.
book, by the way, that somebody wrote a disparaging book about Blackwater.
Yeah. Look, people can write shit and make it up, especially when they never talk to anybody, when they have no experience serving in a military unit, let alone a special operations unit. They have no idea of how that actually works. Anybody in a socialist Marxist delusion can of course think wild, wacky things.
Right.
Military,
you need a bad guy. It's fun to have a bad guy.
Military contractors have been disparaged throughout history, but it is, from time to time, a very necessary part of protecting a country. I mean, Hollywood used to love the Flying Tigers, still does. Made a John Wayne movie about it. The Flying Tigers was a private military company hired by China, nationalist China, before the communists took over in the 39 and 40, because the Japanese were bombing the hell out of their cities. And so Americans, guys that went on to win the Medal of Honor back in U.S. service later, go to fight in China to defeat Japanese Air Force. Battlefield contractors.
Yeah.
So look, and if you think about it, in Article 1 of the Constitution, it actually talks about Congress having the ability to write a letter of marque. It's called a letter of marque and reprisal, which is basically a hunting license, which allows private ships with private crews to go after enemy ships. And it talks about that in detail before it ever even talks about Congress raising a navy or an army. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So because I do believe in free enterprise, and I do think a lot of times for-profit free enterprise does a much better job than a government bureaucracy. I just think you could make that argument all day long. It doesn't mean you get rid of the U.S. Army, of course, but to what degree, if you had your druthers, how much would be outsourced to a company like Blackwater or Triple Canopy or whatever it is? What kinds of things do you guys do better than does the U.S. military?
I would say, look, the idea of the government contracting private entities to do full-on military formations for offensive state-on-state combat? No, of course not. But for the training, logistics, maintenance support, etc., there's a ton of things that the U.S. government does way more expensive than we can. I'll give you a very simple example. If you look at, we're in California. California has wildfires. When a private contractor shows up to do wildfire fighting, they might run 2 Chinook helicopters, which is a big aircraft that'll lift 20 tons at a time with a huge bucket. And you'll see see a debt of 2 of those show up with like 3 pickup trucks and a couple of campers. The U.S. Army to show up with that would be 30 or 40 guys to support a detachment like that. It's almost 10 times the amount of bodies. And where we could send, I'll give you another example. We were hired to take over a remote sensitive base that the U.S. government needed to continue running smoothly. We replaced 166 active duty soldiers with 25 of our guys.
These were elite guys, like
yeah. Well, look, the Army had 28 guys there for security, a rifle platoon, and 138 people supporting 28. We sent 25 guys. 5 of them were dual-hatted to keep the water, the power, the sanitation, the communications, the cooking going, and it ran smoothly for years. Very big difference in cost and logistics footprint, et cetera.
Can you explain, you said at breakfast you were talking about how we were getting our energy, our oil, to run everything.
Oh, sure.
This is fascinating.
So for the duration of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, all the hydrocarbons, the jet fuel, diesel, gasoline that the U.S. used in country was all shipped in largely from the Mediterranean, down through the Red Sea to Karachi, and then trucked up into Afghanistan. And it provided about a third of the Taliban's operating budget. Why? Because all those fuel trucks, because you have a very thirsty DOD footprint, the Taliban tolled all those trucks. So the Taliban's operating budget was about $600 million a year. 200 of that came from tolling U.S. stuff.
They would toll.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, it makes sense.
The trucker operator has to pay the extortion fee to get the stuff through. While that's happening, the duration, there's an oil field drilled and proven by the Soviets when they left. They cemented the wellheads, and that sat there idle the entire time.
You got oil in the ground right there.
Proven. Yes, there was 4 test wells that were driven.
How much oil do you think?
Enough to power all of Afghanistan for the next 50 years.
What?
Yes. And so
we
no
never
one
touched it.
And that's the problem with generals making that decision, because they think about controlling terrain. And a business guy, I advocated that the U.S. needed one person in charge, and I said it's a viceroy, and that's a very loaded colonial term.
Yes, it is.
And I meant it to be that way.
Yeah.
But you need one person that's in charge of everything, of military policy and diplomatic policy and economic policy.
Why? That seems like top-down control, though. That seems like too much.
No, because a slave with two masters is a free man. And so what you had is nobody was in charge in Afghanistan, and all these factions playing off against each other. And it was who could whisper the loudest or the nastiest back in Washington. And it is why you had we went through 18 different commanders in charge in Afghanistan in the 20 years. So who's in charge?
And every time they'd be like, "We're around the corner here."
Success is just around the corner. Just keep doing the same thing.
Same crazy
so
shit.
A viceroy type person would say, drill there. There's $20 million. Drill those wells. $100 million buys the refinery, and it would save the $15 to $20 billion a year that the U.S. was spending in moving all that gas and diesel.
Did you tell people this at the time?
Of course.
And what'd they say?
Generals can't think that way.
Because it's not their MO. It's just not.
Yeah, and look, the British also had a saying that a functioning workshop is better than a battalion of soldiers.
Explain that.
So everything I recommended to change policy in Afghanistan to avoid the debacle that happened in August of 2021 was based on how did the British maintain presence in India and Pakistan for 200 and some years. They built their units based on 19 locals, one expat who would live with, train with, and fight with for the duration. But they focused on trade and employment. And so there's a lot of things that the U.S. should have done, like one of the largest copper deposits in the world is just 30 miles south of Kabul. It's called the Mas Aynak mine. They've been mining there for over 1,000 years. And again, the Chinese early on bribed the Afghans, bought the concession, and sat on it because they never really established security there. But you could have opened that mine and employed 10,000 Taliban.
And those people are not going to be fighting.
Exactly. Literally suck them out of the fighting force, because the Taliban paid for most of their fighters.
Right.
They were not super ideological. They were paid fighters.
Because they had no other option.
Exactly. Yeah. So if the Taliban are paying $10 a day, we're going to pay 12. And I'll give them a pick and a shovel, feed them 3 square meals a day, let them pray 5 times. Good. We just took an entire infantry division of combat power away from the Taliban. That's a model that can be repeated, and it's not that expensive. In fact, the mine would actually make money.
And so you could probably do the same thing with these oil wells. That would have employed people.
Sure.
Maybe different. Who knows?
Sure. No, because you would have saved tens of billions of dollars in not having to import it. So when you crack a barrel of oil, the top 40% you make into gasoline and then then jet fuel and then diesel. The bottoms is HFO. It's not super green and super carbon friendly, but you can burn it through big generators and power the country. One of the other programs we did as a company was the narcotics interdiction units. And so it got us into a lot of weird places around the country. And you just feel terrible for the Afghans in the wintertime, especially because they're literally burning plastic refuse and animal shit just trying to stay warm.
Yeah.
So a life without energy is cold, hard, and miserable.
Yes.
And HFO generation of all that remaining oil.
What is HFO? Sorry,
heavy fuel oil. It's the bottom half of a barrel of oil that you would have gotten off a refinery. So those are the kind of things a business approach to Afghanistan would have been very different than a Pentagon-focused business. Of course. And that's across administrations, because the Bush administration was...
And no president said... I mean, you're speaking to me right now. If I'm the president, I would have been like, this is a no-brainer. This is not difficult. Obviously, let's do that.
And again, you need unity of decision-making in country. And in the delusion of the United States, we thought, if we just have elections in Afghanistan, we're going to make it this Jeffersonian paradise. Right. No, it's a bunch of warlords. There's massive corruption. And in the inevitable American habit that we always repeat, we sprinkle a lot of weeds and thorns of corruption with a massive fire hose of cash, which grows lots more corruption.
Of course.
So forcing everything on a diet, including the Pentagon on a diet, would have caused some rational ideas to come to to come to the surface.
That's so incredibly frustrating. It's just amazing.
Because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Not just embarrassing, but our enemies watched the collapse of this so-called American Protectorate and seeing people clinging to C-17s as the airplanes are taking off.
Did you?
That is not. Everything. I wrote an op-ed in May of 2017 because Steve Bannon was a friend of mine, and he said Afghan policy is going to be up for discussion. Write an op-ed, see if you can change the thinking. So I did. I wrote it for an audience of one. President read it, sitting at the Oval Office, circled it, called in his national security advisor, who had this was McMaster, a 3-star armor officer. I take nothing away from that, but he wanted his 4th star, and he would do nothing contrary to what the Pentagon wanted. And the Pentagon wanted to send 70,000 more troops to Afghanistan.
Why?
This is because that's what they do.
That's what they do.
And Trump said no to that. He said, I like this plan, do this. But of course, the Pentagon shit all over that idea. Mattis said my ideas, the analysis of the root problems were accurate, but he just could not accept contractors doing it, which is why I said the agency under Title 50 authority should do this under a very small, light footprint and let the Pentagon go home. And that would have kept the lights on in Afghanistan. At that time, for all the people that say, Erik just wants to privatize the war, it's wrong. There was already 30,000 contractors in country. We're going to take that number down to 6,000. And everybody else could leave. And
you predicted.
It would have cost less than 5% of what the U.S. was spending annually. In fact, what the U.S. appropriated just to resettle all the refugees would have paid for what I recommended for 4 years. So it is a compounding series of frustrations for how that went. And it was so preventable.
You saw it coming, didn't you?
Yeah, because the U.S. military built an Afghan army that was a mirror image of itself, that was completely dependent on contractor support and contracted air support. And,
so high-tech stuff.
And laser-guided bombs and all the gadgetry. And I called it, I was within 2 weeks of calling when it would collapse because I knew a friend of mine was running a fuel contract, hauling fuel to all the Air Force bases for U.S. jets to do air support. And I knew when that ended. And we just did the math for how long it would take the Taliban to go from, because if there's air power around pounding groups, they're not going to get together in groups bigger than 50 or 100. But when that goes away, now they go to 500, 1,000, 5,000. That's big enough to roll over cities. And they just, like a bunch of Visigoths, they just rolled in.
How is life for the average Afghani? Do you have any idea?
It's miserable.
It is
miserable. For all the advancements in education and infrastructure and women's rights, out the window.
All out the window.
Women cannot be in public unless they're accompanied by a male.
So it's back to what it was.
Schools are closed. It's 1,000% awful.
I didn't know that. I was hoping that these young Taliban were young and they were a little bit more modern.
Oh, no.
No.
The old crazies are fully in charge, as radical as ever, and there's 20 different terror groups that have all taken up root back in the country again, directly opposite of what the Biden administration said.
Because they can train and nobody's going to bother them. Because
exactly. It's truly unmolested terror training ground for them. And even the lie of saying, well, Al-Qaeda has been defeated and they're not going to come back. Ayman Zawahiri, who was the co-founder of Al-Qaeda with bin Laden, was back in Kabul a month after the U.S. pulled out.
Is he still alive?
No. The agency, they zapped him about May, June of 2022. But they knew where he was for months, just watching and waiting.
That was that.
And he was living yeah, exactly, the Ginsu.
Jesus.
Yes. But he was living 400 meters from where the British embassy was in the center of Kabul. Yep.
What? And what was that thing that they got him with?
It's a specially modified Hellfire missile, which doesn't really have a charge. It just has some blades that come out. So it kind of flies through him and chops him up. It's a very low collateral damage way to take a shot.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about the military-industrial complex. I said to you, Erik, what is this thing? And you said, it's real.
It's very real.
Yeah. So there's profit in war. You sound still ambitious about Afghanistan. I feel like if you had your way, there's part of you that just wants to go in there and make things right again. which we don't have to get into, but it was intriguing.
Well, look, Afghanistan was also personal for me because long before 9/11 happened, I interned in college for Dana Rohrabacher, who was originally a speechwriter for Reagan. And after he left the White House, he went and hung out with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan who were fighting the Soviets. And so he had a lot of connectivity there. And in 1997, I was just out of the Navy, out of the SEAL teams. And he asked me, and he said, could you please sponsor a peace conference for the Afghans? Because we're trying to get the king, Zahir Shah, to go back to Afghanistan to make peace before the Taliban had fully taken power. And I funded it. It was not cheap.
Wow.
And it was a couple $100,000.
Wow.
And we had this peace concert because we were trying to get him to go back for what's called a Loya Jirga, which is a big tribal convention in Afghanistan to try to make peace. The king didn't go back. He was too comfortable living in Rome. And sadly, Afghanistan happened the way it was. But so for the people, there's a lot of good people there. And can you imagine being stuck in a country that's been at war since 1979? Because remember, you look at the pictures of women in Kabul in the 70s, they got the big hair, they got sleeveless blouses, yep. They got legs showing. Mm-hmm. It's not the disaster that it is now.
And you're right. It truly became a disaster.
Yeah.
It gives you an idea of how tenuous civilization is and just
how easy it is to knock apart and how difficult it is to put it all back together.
I think about it all the time for our country. It worries the shit out of me.
Yep.
I think we've got to come to terms with the fact that social media, being able to purify your echo chamber, the fact that your algorithm will lie to you all the time or give you the things you already agree with, we've got to come to terms with that. Also, there's a 1% who don't live a real life who are trying to control a narrative that just for the rest of us who have to construct a life. I feel like there are people like we construct a life. You have to build a business. A lot of things go wrong. You're putting out fires all day long, raising a family. That shit is hard, life, building my brand. If I don't get butts in the seat, that's a problem. Exactly. Constantly staying relevant. There are people out there that don't pay a price for being wrong. They can sit back and be a deconstructionist. They can kind of deconstruct what's wrong. And, you need those people. If you want to write books, it's fine. I'm all for scholarship. I'm all for professors and everything else. But the lateral cooperation with these people, the fact that they come from the same zip code, come from the same education, and they are running our social media, running our newsrooms, running our entertainment industry and everything else. They're controlling that narrative. That worries me.
When you look back at some of the successful assassinations of American leaders, they said it was an anarchist. I say we still have anarchists. That exist.
Damn right.
And
because you're right, Eric. Because if you really dig into that, what they're actually after is destruction. Because the very institutions that have made this country, in my opinion, I think the founding fathers solved the political problem. I think this is the Federalist Papers were the greatest idea in certainly political philosophy. James Madison, we should have a day. We should have a day just honoring James Madison. These are people that don't see that and want to tear down all the institutions because they are inherently what? Racist, patriarchal, oppressive, and all the other bullshit because they break the world into oppressor, oppressed, predator, prey, and all that stuff. Very binary way of thinking. Very binary way of thinking for a bunch of non-binary people. It's a very weird kind of way to go. So
yeah. A good friend is a psychiatrist, and I asked him why all this explosion of transgender and all this other stuff. And he said every population has about 3% that are highly susceptible to suggestion. And in the 90s and the 2000s, it was about bulimia or anorexia.
Social contagion.
And now the social contagion of mass shootings, right? How do they make a pathetic, failed problem and they make themselves real by going and shooting up a school or a mall, or focusing on how they're changing their gender? It's really sad and it's wrong. It doesn't mean the rest of society has to go along with whatever that mental illness is.
I heard a very interesting breakdown of that. We are living in times where, for a lot of reasons, Nietzsche said God is dead back in, I think it was 1900 or earlier. And in a way, the notion of a higher transcendent truth is very taboo to even talk about. You can say you're spiritual, but God forbid you say something like I'm a Christian or whatever. I mean, and what happens when you get rid of God? What happens when you mock the original traditional, the infrastructure that gave us these bases for faith and that provide a great deal of inspiration, by the way, for people. Yes, do they have their problems? Sure. But what happens when you take God out of the equation is human beings will invent their own gods. Oh, yeah. They'll come up with their own religion. And somebody said, and I thought it was right on the mark, the transgender movement is not different than, essentially, I've been born again. I am a born again. I used to be a man, now I'm a woman. Don't mention my dead name. This is my new name. I have now, I was lost and now I'm found. But it's ideologies are sick religions. They're not complete. And it really is, rather than a guide full of symbolism, inspirational, these are people that are being taught what to think, not how to think. And that's the problem with our...
Charles Manson was also a cult leader.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We're not regarding him as a legitimate religious or societal commentator.
Right.
I like what Margaret Thatcher said. She said, faith is necessary for society because it gives people the means to restrain themselves so the state doesn't have to.
Amen to that. That's so true. It really is true. But maybe we're talking like a couple old guys. You know, so these things take some time to come to, I think, in a way. I don't know. You know, but I want to get back to the there is a lot of money in war. And, you know, if you said to me, you know, our intelligence apparatus finds ways to exacerbate situations because there's profit in doing so, I would believe you. I would have, you know, probably 3 years ago, I said, you've been watching too many movies, and now I'm open to all suggestions. I've become way more cynical. How do we talk to me about the...
Sure. Look, I sold Blackwater in 2010. So everybody says, well, you know, he made all this money in defense and now he's bashing it. We never had any lobbyists. We didn't advocate for any kind of special appropriations or to spend more in any way. In fact, I think I've been very consistent for 20 some years of doing this is to spend less. And we liked doing firm fixed price contracts because you have to bid and you say, it's going to cost us this much to do it. And most of the defense world wants to do what's called cost plus, where they get to imagine building a house where the builder says, well, I think it's going to cost $100,000 to build the house, but it might be more. And we're just going to keep going until it's done and I'm going to charge you. That's basically what cost plus contracting is. And they're incentivized to charge more because they get to add their fee on top. So if you follow the money in Washington, Congress appropriates way too much money to a Defense Department that spends it on an increasingly consolidated contractor basis. Because you used to have 100 major defense contractors. Now you basically have 5.
How'd that happen?
The U.S. government did not enforce any kind of antitrust. And so we've allowed way over consolidation. And so it really squeezes out the small guy who has a better idea that can operate more effectively. The only reason Blackwater did well is we kind of I had a surfboard at the time the waves were peaking, because we were a service firm and we said yes, and we just outmaneuvered all the super big guys who kind of didn't want to do the difficult, dangerous stuff that we did. But after the contractors get this overinflated budget, they end up spending a lot of money, paying literally a battalion of lobbyists, about 800 lobbyists that are registered just for the defense industry to spend money in all the key districts. The most expensive weapon system in human history is the F-35. Okay, it's a kind of a disaster of an Air Force program, and it is built in 45 states.
How interesting.
To make it veto proof. It's not in 45 states because diversity is our strength. No, it's because
the politician's not going to say my district doesn't get these jobs.
Exactly. It becomes a jobs program. Yeah. And so
Washington is an economy of influence.
Yes, exactly.
How do we, I mean, one way is to say, libertarians say, make government smaller.
Well, we would suck less. The government would suck less if it was smaller. Mm-hmm. So everything across the board.
And accountable.
It's not even a guns or butter question. Just make it all smaller, because we spend way too much in defense and we spend way too much in social programs, and we're now $34 trillion in debt. So the interest payments
$34 trillion in debt?
Yes.
So just so you guys know, a trillion is 1,000 billion. How much is a billion? Well, that's 1,000 million. Let me break this down for you. I don't know if you've ever heard this.
It's a billion millions.
It's so insane. It's a billion millions.
Yeah.
So that would be 1 million seconds is about 11 days. 1 billion seconds is roughly 33 years. Okay? So you're alive, if you're lucky, very lucky and very long lived, you could stay alive for 3 billion seconds. Okay? That's a lifetime. And you're talking about how many trillions?
34. And it going up fast.
So there you go, kids. Your tax dollars at work.
An extra trillion in deficit every year. So
we'll never pay it back.
So we have a problem. We have a huge problem. It's because you have nation state challengers, and deterrence has been really degraded by the collapse in Afghanistan and just by getting our asses kicked on the periphery. You have problems challenging freedom of navigation, right? You have a ragtag bunch of Shia rebels in Yemen now have shut the Bab el-Mandab, the access to the Red Sea. That's about 50% of world's container traffic goes through there. That's a problem.
Do you have a solution?
On Yemen?
On the fact that war is so profitable and essentially the military industrial. We were at the SHOT Show.
Yep.
In Las Vegas, and boy oh boy is munitions and weapons and all that. It's that economy is alive and well. I don't know how many people it supports, but there are a lot of Americans that have food on the table because they're making all kinds of stuff that.
Now, fortunately, most of the SHOT Show is civilian. It's commercial. Right. Everything from bird hunting to shooting in your backyard. But
I didn't know
the defense shows are eye-watering in terms of the spending as well. Look, we don't need to. The defense budget still breaks down to about half manpower, half stuff and operations. First, break up the big defense contractors. Break them up into smaller component parts. Second, I would replace a huge amount of the procurement staff across the DoD with people that have a lot more experience just from the commercial world, whether it's in the automotive or telecom, highly efficient, highly competitive industries that have not adapted all the horrific habits that the Pentagon has over the last few years. Third, people. We have the same amount of flag officers, generals and admirals, that we did during World War II. In World War II, you had 14 million men under arms. We now have 1.4 million. We have a smaller military today than we did in 1940 before World War II started. Okay? So we have as many flag officers now as we did during World War II at the height of conflict with 14 million. We're now at 1.4. And this is in an era with digital communications, secure video conferencing, all the rest, where you should be able to run very flat and fast organization with lots of quick decision making. Mm-hmm. And instead you have this massive gummed up ball of wrong. And I've said it before, if the next SecDef should fire every flag officer and make them resubmit a one-page memo about why they should be rehired for what they do for lethality and readiness. Those are the only two things the military is for.
And
readiness.
Huh.
Okay? View it as the U.S. military should be like a big attack dog waiting to be let off leash. That's it. Not there for social engineering, not there for diversity. You're there to focus on mauling the enemy.
Right. Protecting us. Yeah.
And then you want a military that is so fearsome and mean that nobody wants to tangle. And that's how you prevent wars.
Take the profit out of it. What is your what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about the most?
Internal conflict inside the United States from segments of society that we have a really failed education system over the last few decades. And so
and Betsy Voss is your sister, I think, right?
My big sister.
Huh.
Yep.
Yeah. I like her.
I do too.
She gets a lot of shit, but I like her. And I like
well, you know what?
She has to say.
She fought the good fight as Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
She had, and I commend her, because she didn't need a job.
Yeah.
She donated her entire salary. Meaning she never took a salary from the federal government.
How about that? How about that, by the way?
Again, she and her husband had given tens of millions of dollars over decades to school choice programs, just letting kids in bad inner city urban schools a chance for their parents to choose which school they go to. What a concept.
Oh my God. She sounds like a fascist.
And then second, she and her husband gave tens of millions of dollars of actual scholarship dollars for poor inner city kids to spend at a school of their choice.
God.
Literally ransoming them out of a failed school system. I mean, look, the American public school system is so bad, the KKK, Nathan Bedford Forrest himself, could not have come up with a better thing to keep black kids down
100%.
than a totally failed school system. And so I remember after Trump got elected, she called me, she goes, Eek, please advocate. I really want to be Secretary of Education. I want to make a difference.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Not a dime she made and gave all that money away.
No. And
but why'd they go bad on her? What is it? Is it she just against the teachers union?
Because the teachers union is another set of people that are all about defending the status quo. And what a horrible,
and how's it going, guys?
What a horrible status quo.
What do they blame their failures on?
Did you ever see the movie Waiting for Superman?
I didn't. I never saw it because I know all about it because it'll make me crazy. Some things I can't watch because I stay up at night.
You see the moms, inner city moms, waiting for a lottery for a chance to get their kids into a different school.
I know.
Because every parent still wants the best for their kid.
Of course. Vouchers,
and
man. That's a Milton Friedman thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That vouchers, school choice is what you want to do.
Look, the public school system was kind of a Jeffersonian idea. It was an idea that education is the great enabler, whether you're rich, poor, from which side of the tracks you were born on. It's supposed to be the great equalizer to give you the basics to start climbing the ladder.
Right.
And instead, elite liberals, happy to have their kids go to the school of their choice or what they can afford, and all the kids on the wrong side of the tracks, well, to heck with you. That's kind of their attitude.
And they would say, how dare you? But
it is so wrong. And I think now there's some pockets bubbling up of school choice, and it's working, and that's converting a lot of folks, neighborhood by neighborhood.
Good ideas take a long time. The diffusion of innovation takes a long time, unfortunately. But I do think that eventually the better idea wins. I hope. I mean, it's hard to ignore.
Churchill said, "The Americans have a way of getting to the right decision after they've tried everything else." And remember, he was half American, so I
didn't know that.
He's qualified.
Was Churchill half American?
Yes, he was.
What?
American mother.
Is that true?
Yep.
Come on, I had no idea.
Cento per cento.
Is that right?
Yep.
I never heard that. Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. What about, maybe you don't know much about it, but we may all be looking over here while this AI tidal wave is coming. And I have heard that some of these, and from some of the people I met actually this weekend, there are certain people I met who who are sort of the friction point between these AI labs and the U.S. government. And when you hear them talk about what they're doing in these AI labs, when you hear the machines that have the kind of cognition that is so advanced, they think that the machine is pretending to be dumber than it is. That stuff worries the shit out of me. So, I mean, do you know much about this? Are you involved in this in any way or no?
I have focused on human-derived problems, not the AI so much.
Yeah.
But
that makes
look, every machine, even the best run software still has lots of glitches and problems. I guess I'm not as worried about AI as long as we don't give it too much leeway in those network systems, right?
Yeah.
The idea of Skynet being able to automatically fire nuclear weapons, there's still, as long as we keep a significant human input, to turn that switch?
The problem is that the problem is that AI is now making AI, and these labs are actually sounding the alarm because some of them are going, "Hey, this stuff they took out." Well, I don't even know if I can say it, so I don't want to. So I hear things from people sometimes who work in, and I want to be careful on podcasts not to betray their trust, but you hear some things and you go,
Well, and it's such, okay. And then you think about North Korea with AI or Chinese with AI.
Right.
That's very, very scary, and very possible
Is
because even what they've done with human cloning, cloning humans.
Yeah, man.
So if you have no moral, religious-based constraints, then you get some pretty weird derivatives very quickly.
Yes, you do, because what you try to do is create your own gods.
Or whether it's a bioweapon or other. Yeah, so those are problems. And if it's one thing humans have proven is an infinite ability to do stupid shit.
Stupid shit. Who are the countries you worry about the most? Is it Russia, China, North Korea? Is it?
I don't worry about Russia.
They just don't have the reach capability.
Oh, look, the very unnecessary war in Ukraine. The really sad thing is if the left had not done the complete provably made up hatchet job of the Trump-Russia collusion nonsense, Trump would have been able to make a deal with Putin. They don't have to be our friends. They don't have to be our enemies. Call them frenemies. Yeah. But we have so much more in common with Russia culturally than we do with China or Japan or Korea or India.
Yep.
And Russia's long-term interest is still with the West. For 80 years, for hundreds of years actually, it was always a goal to keep the productivity of German industry, away from linking up with the resources of Russia. All that we've done now is pushed China into Russia into somewhat of a submissive role to China's industrial might, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, Russia does have oil, and so as long as they have that, they're kind of a one-crop economy. But I agree. I mean, when people are talking about regime change, like you're going to get rid of Putin and put who in place? It's the other thing people don't think
what comes
about.
next? But interesting note, up until the 1850s, the whole eastern side of Russia, like Sakhalin Island, etc., was China, was considered part of China.
Oh, wow.
And about a year after the invasion, the new invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Chinese started publishing maps with those original islands in Chinese names.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So making claims on that. So China very much sees itself as the center of the universe. Their maps are listed showing China in the middle of the map, and they have that paradigm. And so again, long term, Russia belongs more with the West than they do with China, and they realize that. What
responsibility did the U.S. play in, and Ukraine play in Russia's invasion? Let me ask you, was it? I know that the U.S. essentially had said at one point, we won't interfere with Ukraine's bid for NATO membership. Putin said that was always the line in the sand.
Sure, but before that, even in the very early 90s, James Baker, Secretary of State, we will not keep pushing NATO membership farther east.
Right.
Think about it from a Russian perspective, and people say, well, he's a Russian agent, all the rest. No, I just read a lot of history. The World War II...
Are you called a Russian agent?
Well, people called me any number of things.
Yeah, I love it.
But you think about it from a Russian perspective. Who defeated Nazi Germany?
The Russians, the Russian winter.
The Russian army did.
Yeah.
The Soviet army. I mean, while the United States was still messing around in North Africa at the Battle of Stalingrad, there was 1.2 million Russians killed just in that battle.
I've been there. I know.
And over a 3-month period, they erased 800,000 men from the German order of battle. Okay. The United States, in the total European North African theater, we lost 250,000. That's it. Wow. Now, not in any way taken away from U.S. servicemen that fought, but we talk numbers. It's the Soviets that broke the back of the Nazi army. So for the Russian, they lost 22 million people doing that, And so from a Russian perspective, with all these NATO countries now right up on their border, at more threat than any time since May of 1940, 41, right. That's a problem
They're
for
under
them.
siege.
And so,
and
so because
ports.
of their longtime cultural, traditional interactions with Ukraine, why did we need to press for NATO membership of Ukraine? That was dumb, unnecessary. And again, I would say an adult in the presidency would have reduced the confrontation and made it not necessary.
Wow, man, what a tragedy! Because you just wonder how it's going to end. It's either going to end with the Russians bleeding out on the Ukrainian fields, or I don't know. I don't know what you do.
The Ukrainians don't have enough manpower.
They don't.
I mean, let alone the massive shortage of actual basic industrial base for providing artillery shells and the stuff needed to fight every day.
Without our aid, that's for sure, right?
Well, and trying to out conventional war the Russian bear is a dumb idea, and there's just a manpower inequality there. And
so you think Ukraine will fall eventually?
I don't know if they'll fall. I think they should try to just settle and freeze the lines and be done. Because all they're doing right now is chewing up future generations of demographics.
Yeah, man.
Because they need to repopulate, because they have lost hundreds of thousands of their best, most capable people.
Have they really lost that many people?
Oh, yeah.
So they've a lot of. I mean, do we have an idea of the casualties? You do.
Hundreds of thousands each side.
Hundreds of thousands on each side.
Dead. Oh yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
it is a terrible, and I wish. Look. So the invasion started in February of 2022, and September of that year was a window because the Ukrainians had kind of they'd stopped the assault and they'd started to push back, and there was a window to make a settlement, and the U.S. forced the Ukrainians to keep fighting. It's like, it's our chance to bleed the Russian army. Well, that's dumb for the United States to be pushing to fight the last Ukrainian man. That is not fair. That is kind of the perpetual warfare class of people pushing for the nonsense in Washington.
How do we get that? How do we get? It seems like there are a lot of people pushing for war who've never done a day of service in their life. What is that about? It's
a very, if you think about ancient Rome, good and bad, like the Battle of Carrhae, Cannae, they lost 70,000 Romans in one day. 70,000. Back then, when the population was a fraction, there was like 40 or 50% less people in the Roman Senate 2 weeks later.
Jeez.
Because the elites fought in the military.
They fought in the military.
Correct.
The Brits were that way too, by the way.
They had
if you were a lord or a lady, you did your service. You were on the front line a lot of times.
Yes, and now we have a complete divorce of the oligarch class, which is why it's good that there's more and more veterans being elected now to displace some of the clowns that we have making those decisions. But it's not just, the permanent state bureaucracy across the board needs to be thinned with a steel broom.
Yeah, with people who've paid a price for being wrong. It goes back to that.
People who have to live with consequences of bad decisions.
Yes. And we don't have that. That is I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if, I'm always interested in new problems and things that are a new thing, because sometimes you can be like, well, it's always been this way, but I do think that's a new problem. I really do.
It is, especially because of the unlimited printing that the Federal Reserve has done, and it's made, like we had in Afghanistan, a fire hose of cash on stupid ideas.
Yeah.
We have a fire hose of cash in Washington, which has allowed its government to never have to make a versus B decision. It's both and then more so. And with nobody ever pulling back saying, are we getting any kind of return on investment on that? No, it's just more and more perpetual stupidity. So it's going to be a self-righting sailboat somehow, because we're either going to run out of money and have a Weimar Republic. Remember that it was the Germany after World War I ran its economy into oblivion, and then they elected Adolf Hitler.
Named Adolf Hitler.
Exactly.
How does October 7th and the Israel-Hamas conflict, is that going to scale into a larger war? Iran, what is going on there?
the thing I'm worried about now, because the Houthis, again, Hamas, Iranian proxy.
Yeah.
It's the one case.
So are the Houthis, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
But in the case of Hamas, that's a Sunni proxy. Iran is Shia. The Houthis are Shia. But what the Houthis have done now by closing the Bab el-Mandab, which is the waterway right there between Yemen and Ethiopia and Eritrea, is it shut off more than half the volume going through the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. That's 40% of Egypt's GDP depends on the tolls of ships going through there. Egypt's a poor country, 110 million people. They use that money they made from the canal to subsidize bread. If you destabilize 110 million people and they put a Muslim Brotherhood, if there's a coup or some kind of violent protest, that is a huge, huge, huge problem. Qatar is the main funding problem of all this badness. Funding Hamas, funding a lot of...
They are. And
yes, and they bought a lot of influence. Why is there so much pro-Hamas demonstrations on American campuses? Who's the largest provider, the largest funder of American universities outside? Qatar.
How about that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's a crazy conflict of interest. How interesting.
Yep.
Qatar, and you think that that's probably why the administrations of these schools are kind of mum on this whole thing. They're just kind of like, well, we don't want to rock the boat.
Bought and paid for.
Of course, bought and paid for. Smart of Qatar. I mean, they're putting their money. They're trying to buy influence here.
Yep, they bought a lot of influence in the UK and across Europe. I mean, in fact, just a few months ago, they busted a bunch of leftist European Union politicians with millions of dollars of cash provided by the Qatari intelligence service.
What?
Oh yeah,
is that true?
Buying influence the old-fashioned way.
Damn.
Black bag diplomacy.
Here you go. Here's some cash.
Yep.
It's one way to go about it, I guess, and so it goes, and so the wheel spins. It sounds like, now I don't know what you're doing right now. You sold Blackwater. Maybe you want to keep things under wraps, but my guess is I'm
fully retired.
Are you?
No way.
You're not right. I saw you working out. I saw you doing. People should know. I don't know if I mentioned this. Erik was. I was annoyed at how the kind of shape you were in, and I pride myself in being in shape. I don't like a guy who's roughly my age. You're a little younger. You're actually a little younger.
Happy birthday, by the way.
57 today, ladies and gentlemen. And you're like a kid, right? What are you, 54 or something like that?
54.
Yeah. Yes. If you have any life questions you want to throw my way, go ahead. I'm here for you. I'm here. It's bullshit. It's bullshit taking advantage of your youth. And you were scolding a guy I was training with who I thought was I swear to God, a backpacker from. I thought this guy was a backpacker in Denver, and he was
He had the right haircut for that.
Yeah, he was a SEAL Team 6. He did other stuff in the military, the elite of the elite, which I was like, well, why isn't this guy getting tired? And you were making fun of him.
Well,
we're doing wall balls. He wasn't hitting the line. I didn't know you knew him. You're like, you're not even hitting the.
You got to throw shit where it's due. Exactly.
Yeah. You seem to be throwing that ball a little higher than me, and it bothered me. But that's okay.
I work out to only make myself a less disagreeable person.
Yeah. Just a miserable person.
It grinds a little bit of the anger off.
12 kids, ladies and gentlemen. The man has 12 kids, which is an accomplishment of its own. Which is amazing. I saw a picture of them all. They're beautiful. They all looked like a J. Crew ad. What were you gonna ask?
Can we touch on Taiwan before we're up? Because Erik made a prediction of sorts at the end of last year.
I love it. Thank you for that. Erik, Taiwan, you made a prediction last year.
Look, Xi, the ruler of China, Xi, has been making very uneconomic decisions that would indicate they're going to do something. They're preparing for something in Taiwan. One, for example, their big banks with their huge fleet of aircraft that they own for commercial aircraft. They're selling it all. They're really making themselves sanction proof. They're accumulating like a year and a half worth of wheat, massive amounts of hydrocarbons they're bringing in. And he even says to his speeches to the standing committee, prepare for great conflict. What does that mean? Wow. A trade war? No. Prepare for great conflict.
And he's kind of like the cult of personality there.
He has accumulated more power than any ruler of China since Mao. And so normally the leaders have served for 2 5-year terms. This last time, it was October of 2022. He At the party congress, his predecessor, Hu Jintao, he had dragged out in the middle. It was kind of a fuck you, I'm in charge now. And he fired all the other people that were not super loyal to him.
He kind of purged them all.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And between the anti-corruption campaign, which has basically been a purge because there's three factions of the Communist Party, the Communist Youth League, the Young Princelings, and the Communist Youth League. He has smashed any other opposition.
Does he arrest them, or does he just kind of retires them?
Even the big entrepreneurs like Jack Ma, the guy that founded Alibaba,
I know.
He disappeared from public view, and then like 8 months later reappeared, and they said he had embraced supervision.
God, man,
he was lecturing to a kindergarten class.
Was he?
In some small village in China? It would be like Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Elon Musk in one person in China, and he just disappears from public view it's unreal, I'm in charge. Man. So I would be shocked if the Chinese don't try something this year, because I don't think they're going to see a weaker administration on this than they do right now. They see how tapped out the U.S. industrial base is, the lack of readiness of the U.S. military, the collisions at sea, just kind of the nonsense and the focus on DEI and wokeism and all the rest. Yeah. And the weather window to do something in China is about May, June, because the winds blow through the Taiwan Straits hard.
So you're saying that you think the Chinese
if they're going to go, I think they would go this spring.
I mean, with all their demographic problems, with all that, they don't have access to energy, all those things. They can't grow their own food, and yet they're going to go into Taiwan.
But why would they be accumulating a year and a half worth of food, a year and a half worth of hydrocarbons, dumping?
I didn't know that.
Even the big real estate holdings in the United States, Chinese-owned hotels here, getting sold for 20 cents on the dollar, exiting, getting themselves sanction-proof. There is a deluge exit of Chinese money leaving the United States from those holdings.
Wow.
So I'm not saying it's absolutely going to happen, but indications and warnings would say they're selling off their aircraft balance sheets. They're accumulating all their cash, all their dollar cash. They're moving into banking, not subject to Western sanctions. So when you take 5 or 6 of those, one is anomaly, 2 less of an anomaly.
No, this is a preparation.
5 or 6, methinks they might be onto something.
Methinks there might be.
Yes.
Yeah. That kind of brings me back.
There was just an election a couple weeks ago, and because China was really pushing for the Kuomintang, which is the most kind of pro-Beijing party to win. Mm-hmm. But the DPP candidate, kind of the more pro-independent status quo people won, which is not what Beijing wanted. So again, all those things indicate, I'd be surprised. And I don't know that it's going to be a full-on armada, 600,000 guys over the beach. Might be 10,000 guys that they smuggle into the country in plain clothes, and they do kind of a decapitation strike inside, followed by some helicopter assault, etc. That's if I was China, that's how I would do it.
You would do that?
Yeah.
10,000 guys in plain clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That worries me, because somebody could do that to our government. I'm saying from the inside in.
What I've advocated for Taiwan to deter that is a home guard, because their military is very corrupted. It's only 150,000. But if you think about the American Revolution, 3% of our population actually fought for liberty.
3%? That's
it.
Huh. So a home guard, meaning you would arm civilians, or?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
The firemen, more of a national guard where the arms caches are stored at local civil defense centers, because that's a 500,000 or 600,000 man endeavor. That's a very hard thing for a planner in Beijing to say, we're going to take every one of those cities. Because if they're going to do it, they have to go quick. They cannot afford a long, dragged-out conflict. Well,
warfare now seems to be fought with drones and stuff. So, let me ask you that, because you're a guy who just knows a lot about this. I own guns, and I'm a Second Amendment guy and all that, but I'm not going to be able to, I've got my cachet of things, but my AR-15 and my tactical shotgun and my 9mm ain't doing a damn thing against some of the drones you were talking about with those copperheads and stuff like that. Or
with an EFP.
or what is it?
Explosive form penetrator.
Yeah, whatever it is, that's like, see you later. There's not a damn thing I can do. So that's technology is making it so that, your kung fu's no good here. You got guns, great. Access to a well, great. You got your garage is converted into a CrossFit gym, awesome, dude. You got traps. Watch this. You got some nerd and just blows you up. And that's kind of what's going on, right? So how do we, yay or nay?
It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of fighting the dog.
So when a population is fighting to defend their own homeland, you still got to get boots on the ground.
You have to give them basic tools.
Yeah.
Right?
What would the U.S. do in that situation?
Since it's your birthday today.
Yes.
I want to tell you about my favorite Revolutionary War character. His name was Samuel Whitmore. He lived on the way back to Boston from Lexington and Concord. 78 years old, a military veteran, out managing in his fields, and he hears the British coming by to go assault the colonists. He grabs his guns, a rifle and 2 pistols, and he goes out and shoots 3 British soldiers. They get to him. They shoot him in the face. They bayonet him 6 times. They bludgeon him all over with their rifle butts. 78-year-old man. The other American colonists found him later completely bloody, trying to reload to get back in the fight. And that fucker lived for another 18 years. That's a man.
That is inspiring on my 57th birthday, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. He did it at 78 and he lived to 96. That is the spirit of America that you cannot extinguish. And there's a lot of people like that, and I've had the honor of employing thousands of men like that.
Man, that's a great way to end this podcast. I appreciate that. And that's pretty inspiring. And I agree with you, man. I think this is still a great country.
Not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of fighting the dog.
And I would say that a man and a country define themselves along the lines they're willing to defend. And that's important. And I think a human being, you've got to get to a point where you understand the things you'd be willing to fight for and maybe die for if you want to get dramatic, but I'm being serious about it. I think about it all the time. What are you willing to actually lay your life down for? And that is probably the best way to define yourself. And you've served our country, so thanks for your service. And
fun job.
And I'm going to stay close to you, Eric, because if you do take over, I just want to be I want to be close to the king. You know what I'm saying?
Not the king.
No.
We got time to talk about that 1 second?
Oh, dude, I plenty of time. I'm here for you. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Okay. So if you ask what I've been doing, I have not been retired.
Okay.
This resulted from basically a rage phone call after the last 2020 election and all the nonsense and big tech canceling certain voices and all the rest. And we had a tech team together working on something, but we pivoted, said we need to have our own phone completely independent of the Google and Apple universe, not going to be subject to some 25-year-old in Silicon Valley saying what can be said and not. So we developed this. This is an unplugged phone. This is our hardware, our operating system, completely separate. It runs on an American network, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, whatever. But this phone does not have an advertising ID. That's the basic way that your phone tracks where you go, what you buy, who you call, and what you browse. They know that, your phone maker, and they sell that to advertisers to push stuff to you. And that's before even the apps that are sitting on your phone are also doing that and even turning on your microphone and listening. Okay? A modern cell phone has become, yes.
This iPhone. I have the iPhone 14 something.
People I talk to about this, everybody has a story. Man, I was talking to my wife. They were in their bedroom talking about getting a new mattress. And talking about, not typing, not searching, nothing.
This happens to me all the time.
Talking.
And
the next day they're getting advertising for that because your phone is listening. This phone is the answer to that because we block all the advertising ID, all the hooks that the apps try to put in to extract your data. It's a hard no with this. This is the first phone in the world with its own actual firewall.
What is it called? Where can I get it?
It's called an unplugged phone, and you can order one at unplugged.com.
Unplugged.com. You can get that. And because I talked to a bunch of, so again.
It's comparable in speed, storage, camera quality to the high-end phone you're used to paying for, and they cost $950.
$950, and it's right there.
It's working. I get 10,000 inbound.
You do?
Yes.
I'm getting one for sure. Does
Okay.
Rogan know about this? Because I know he'll be all over this.
Well, I need to talk to that man.
Okay, I'm gonna. When I talk to him, I'm gonna tell him about this because that's right up his alley. He loves this stuff. Unplug.com.
Yep.
Because I was talking to a bunch of NSA, CIA guys, and at my show, I did this show for Tier Tactical, and they were laughing at me. They were like, "You're not on Signal, at least. You're not on. You're not doing these things." I mean, they were like, "I can. Your phone is so hackable," which I didn't realize.
Yes. So if you've heard of Pegasus,
Yes,
which is
Israeli.
it's an offensive cyber virus used to hack cell phones. The guy that developed that is our CTO.
Oh wow!
But he developed it as a way for a phone company to do remote service. You have a problem, they send you a text.
Right.
They take over your phone remotely, fix it, and then leave. When it became offensive, he left, and he built a phone which is still used by many governments. It's a high security phone. And then he left there and went on to build a phone that controls most of the world's pacemakers. Because you have a pacemaker in his device in the OR, because it's paired, because you can't have a hackable pacemaker, because you can shut somebody off with a click.
Didn't you tell me something about Cheney, the biggest worry?
Yeah, the biggest worry for the Secret Service was somebody hacking his pacemaker.
Wow.
And shutting him off.
So now this phone is.
So my CTO, literally built the OS and the hardware that controls pacemakers, and now he's done this in a the point is he understands the endpoints, how to prevent a phone from being hacked, and make it usable and to really control user data. So it's in your charge, not big tech.
And it's got text and everything else. It's all the same thing. Yeah.
Big techs. Yes, it has Signal. We have Threema, all the other kind of encryption apps, or your banking apps, or navigation, et cetera. But again, a lot of these are paid for apps, because if you're not paying for something, you're not the customer, you're the product.
So you're out of the.
You're getting a free thing.
Yeah.
It ain't free.
It ain't free.
They're collecting
They're getting your data.
They're collecting your data and they're selling it.
And you're out of the contract business. This is contracting business, private contracting business.
I don't do any government, any PMC type contracting.
Too much of a pain in the ass.
Look, that's probably what I'm best at.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places I'd like to put out the fire, but and the world has gone mad, and there's millions of people suffering unnecessarily.
You think you could do it if I gave you the wherewithal?
100%.
I like your ambition. Where are the three spots you'd hit first? Afghanistan.
Al-Shabaab, easy to finish in Somalia. Those poor people in Somalia and Kenya have been suffering for decades from half measures and bullshit. The problem with the U.S. government is we've had a top-down counterterrorism policy. Wars end when you crush the manpower, logistics, and finance. I don't care who this ruler is. I want him to look left and look right, and nobody's there. When that's done, when you look at the Peloponnesian War, the Punic Wars, the American Civil War, World War I, World War II, the winning side killed off about 30% of the other side. Now, as brutal as that sounds, that's what's necessary to make people realize they're defeated. If you just keep lopping off the head of the snake always regrows another head. And the U.S. spends so much money
lopping
off heads and trying to take a difficult shot in an urban area to prevent civilian collateral. Fuck that. Sorry. Go after crushing the numbers of enemy soldiers. And so our CT policy has been completely skewed for 20 plus years. It's a very, very simple project.
So the simple project with the Al-Shabaab, we know where they train, so you just wipe out those training centers?
I have friends that have served in theater at the highest sensitivities of the U.S. government, and they're so frustrated because they see 500 assholes in a training camp doing military drills, and they can't get permission to go shoot them because the authority is to kill this guy, not these guys. So when instead they could drop 10 dumb Mark 82s for the it's a 500-pound bomb for the cost of one $50,000 precision bomb that they're looking for one asshole with, and you could crush 500 dudes. That's how you do it, because you get rid of all. It's a bottoms up approach.
Really?
Sure.
So now we use SEAL Team 6 to go in and get the top guys, but then it's like it's not doing anything.
Great if you want to do hostage rescue. The rest, crush the numbers.
Crush the numbers. Wow.
So
you would do that with the Taliban.
Somalia, fixable. Yemen, fixable. Afghanistan,
Yemen is fixable.
Absolutely.
Why?
The Houthis?
The Houthis are that civil war
It's not really a civil war. It's very much been inflamed, amplified as a proxy war by Iran,
Right.
and to the point that they've given them now ballistic missiles, long-range anti-ship missiles. I would predict even by April they're going to take a shot at a U.S. aircraft carrier.
Wow. And
So-
you could
Look,
crush
what's
the
been done
Houthis.
in the past, there's a great book called The War That Never Was. And it's Egypt invaded Yemen in the 60s. They displaced the monarch. And there the Israelis armed David Sterling, the British former SAS guys at private military company, paid for by the Saudis. And they drove out the Egyptians. And it's in the same territory we're talking about now. Contracted solutions, working with the other Yemeni forces can drive them out.
You got to get pretty nasty. That's war. It's already nasty.
Look, there's a lot of people going to starve unnecessarily from not getting the fertilizer, goods, et cetera, that they need to plant and grow because the shipping lanes are shut off. That's a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's to busting bureaucracy. And
Look, spend less, more accountability.
yeah,
We don't have, well, this is not that difficult. You just do the basics well.
yeah. I've been trying to find things to argue with you about, Eric, and I can't because you're making a lot of sense here. It feels like so. Unplug.com. I'm going to get my phone. I'm not going to do the drug deal cash thing that I, your buddy. We're walking to the hotel and your buddy was like, "I got cash for you."
That was
He bought a phone from Erik. It was so funny. Like he gave you like cash.
That guy was actually an investor.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. It's hilarious. Like, here you go. Dylan, any questions for Mr. Prince? What was your rank in the military?
I got out as an 03 as a Navy lieutenant.
Navy lieutenant.
A junior guy.
A junior guy. Yeah, but not an FNG.
I was not a completely FNG, no.
Yes, sir. Well, I consider it just a privilege to talk to you, and it's very illuminating. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on your birthday.
Yes, sir.
Happy
And
birthday,
I
you
can't
old
think of a better way. I can't think of a better way. You have no respect. That's the one thing for the elderly, but that's okay. We'll stay in touch. Thank you, sir. Good stuff. Erik Prince, ladies and gentlemen. Off limits. Awesome.